My name was Ali. I was a Muezzin in Mecca, the call to prayer echoing through my life's corridors. Respected, obedient. I wore my identity like a sacred mantle, each prayer a layer of duty that bound me to my community. But beneath the surface, turmoil churned. At 35, I stood on the precipice of a spiritual crisis, where faith turned into a suffocating grip rather than solace. I felt unseen, unheard, a ghost in a realm that revered only blind devotion. Every dawn, as I summoned my neighbors to prayer, an inner battle raged. Questions loomed larger than the grand mosque that towered over my world. Was this all there was? Was my worship an escape or a prison? Fragments of my soul whispered a different truth, a truth I couldn't voice, a truth suffocated by tradition and fear. My prayers felt hollow. I sought connection, yet felt isolated, lost among the millions who fervently believed, yet never questioned. Then came that fateful night. After an overwhelming prayer session, darkness enveloped me. An accident plunged me into the abyss, where despair threatened to consume every ounce of hope within me. In that darkness, Jesus came, his presence vibrant, alive, a stark contrast to the void surrounding me. Ali, he called my name with a love that shattered the chains of my indoctrination. In that moment, I realized the true nature of the spiritual war that I had unknowingly participated in. The facade of my life cracked. I discovered the depth of manipulation forged by religious structures and cultural dogmas, all designed to control rather than liberate. I came back from that brink a new man, marked by truth, yet haunted by the cost it demanded. My family's embrace turned into cold shoulders. My friends branded me a heretic. The weight of their betrayal pressed down, yet an unwavering desire for spiritual freedom ignited within me. Now, I stand before you, one voice in the midst of a growing chorus of individuals yearning for freedom, a community awakening to the reality that lies beneath the facade. The truth I found is not merely personal. It's a call to action, echoing through the lives of countless souls seeking purpose in a world rife with deceit. So join me as I unravel this journey, a quest that transcended mere religious preference and ventured deep into the heart of divine revelation. Before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? And if you feel that pull towards truth, subscribe to Truth from Beyond. Let your heart be nourished by revelations that can transform not just your mind, but your very spirit. You're not just a viewer, you're part of this awakening. In the heart of Mecca, I lived among towering structures that embodied both reverence and rigidity, where the call to prayer echoed through the streets, a constant reminder of my duty as a Muezzin. My life was intricately woven into the tapestry of religious and social expectations that shaped the daily rhythms of our conservative neighborhood. There was a sense of honor in my role, chanting the adhan 5 times a day, directing the faithful to the mosque. Yet, beneath this exterior of devotion, I struggled with the weight of repression and doubt that continued to grow within me. My heart yearned for something more, something beyond the confines of tradition that dictated not just my faith, but every aspect of my identity. One fateful evening, as I prepared to lead the congregational prayer, a sudden wave of dizziness overtook me. I collapsed, and darkness enveloped my consciousness. What seemed like an instant became an eternity as I drifted into a state of being beyond the earthly realm. In this void, I felt both fear and peace until I was drawn into a brilliant light. Suddenly, I found myself standing before Jesus, radiant and full of compassion. His presence enveloped me, and in that instant, my doubts melted away. I understood that this was not just a meeting, but a revelation, one that would redefine everything I thought I knew. Jesus spoke to me, and the world around us transformed. He showed me the hidden agenda at play within our society, revealing how manipulation and deception were woven into the very fabric of our existence. I witnessed the ways in which leaders and elites governed through fear and division, employing religion as a tool to maintain control over the masses. I felt the enormity of this revelation settle into my heart. It was a wake-up call, urging me to question everything I had been taught. The facade of piety I had accepted began to crumble, exposing the spiritual war raging not only within me but across the globe, where many were lulled into complacency by false narratives. The isolation I felt throughout my life became all too clear in those moments with Jesus. He illuminated the truth about our world, how conflict surfaced not from necessity, but rather from the agendas of those in power. I saw how politics intertwined with spirituality, often blinding the faithful to their own potential for awakening. I was shown scenes of suffering and discord, the consequences of accepting deception without question. It was in this understanding that my spirit ignited with urgency. I knew I had to share what I had witnessed. The time for silence had passed. The spiritual war required voices willing to challenge the status quo, and in that moment, I discovered my purpose. As I returned to my body, I was met with overwhelming emotions. I lay there, heart racing, knowing that the man I had been was no longer who I was meant to be. My experience was a catalyst for change, yet the fear of backlash loomed large. The community I had devoted my life to would never accept a Muezzin who spoke of such revelations. I could lose everything: the respect, the stability, the familiarity of my existence. The weight of this dilemma pressed heavily on my chest, leaving me gasping for breath. Yet deep down, I felt an unshakable conviction. If I remained silent, I would be complicit in the very deception I had witnessed. In the days that followed, the conflict within me intensified. I started to feel both compelled and terrified to share my experience with others. The notion of confronting the walls of tradition threatened to crush me, and yet my heart beat louder, calling me to action. I began reaching out to those I trusted, whispering the truths I had been shown, fervently hoping to spark a broader awakening. I'd often wonder, how would they respond? Would they dismiss me as a heretic? Or could I find allies willing to explore the deeper meanings of faith together? I understood that this awakening was not solely for me, but for everyone trapped in the cycle of deception. As I ventured deeper into this new reality, I knew my life would never be the same. The spiritual war I now recognized required courage, resilience, and above all, faith. Not just in Jesus, but in the potential for a collective awakening. I faced uncertainty in every direction, yet each person I shared my experience with rekindled my hope. The possible reconciliation with my estranged family weighed heavily on my heart, but I held on to the belief that love and truth could mend even the deepest divides. The path ahead was cloaked in fog, but with each step I took, I felt the bright light of Jesus guiding me, urging me toward a destiny filled with purpose, connection, and love. How far would I go to lead others out of deception and into truth? That was a question I was ready to explore as I ventured into the unknown. As I stood atop the minaret, my voice resonating through the air, calling the faithful to prayer, I felt a strange dichotomy within me. At 35, I was a respected Muezzin in Mecca, deeply committed to my role and the traditions that governed our lives. I wore my attire with pride, each robe and turban symbolizing the heritage and faith I had inherited. The community lauded my dedication. Yet, as the echoes of my call faded, into the stillness, an emptiness settled in, a profound disconnection that gnawed at my spirit. Each prayer felt like a performance, rather than a true communion with God. The weight of societal and familial expectations pressed down on me, suppressing emotions I had long avoided. Years of emotional repression had cultivated a deep sense of loneliness within my soul. I revered the teachings I had known since childhood, Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something essential was missing. The rituals I performed, meant to draw me closer to the divine, instead felt like shackles binding me to an identity I no longer recognized. I found myself grappling with questions that grew louder by the day. What is the truth behind my faith? Why do I feel so disconnected in a place revered for its spirituality? Every time I donned my traditional garments and climbed the minaret, I felt the weight of expectation, hovering above the crowded streets, while my heart sank deeper into uncertainty. One fateful day, everything changed. As I returned home from the mosque, a sudden, blinding pain shot through my chest. I collapsed on the street, panic rising as darkness began to close in around me. In those moments, I hovered between life and death. I experienced a profound sense of detachment, as if my spirit floated above my body, observing the frantic world below. In this space, enveloped by a void of silence, I encountered a radiant light that beckoned me forward. It was there that I stood, face to face with Jesus. His presence radiated peace, and for the first time in years I felt truly seen. Jesus spoke to me, and I felt a powerful current of love surge through my being. He revealed truths about my life, how the hidden agenda of the elites manipulated faith for their own purposes. I saw the layers of deception that had veiled the understanding of spirituality in my community and beyond. Wars were fought not in the name of faith, but as a means of control. The suffering I saw around me was a byproduct of a deeper, systematic exploitation, one that thrived on ignorance and fear. I sensed the urgency of this revelation. It became clear that I was part of a larger spiritual war that raged within and without. In the presence of Jesus, I understood that I had a choice to make. He unveiled the reality of my existence, emphasizing that the spiritual disconnection I felt was a universal struggle. I was not alone. Many suffered under the weight of perceived obligations, following traditions without ever questioning their true essence. Jesus' message ignited an awakening within me, urging me to embrace my truth, to break free from the chains of expectation. As visions of societal division flashed before me, I felt compelled to share my experience with the world, determined to guide others toward awakening. Yet as I began to return to my body, the severity of the situation set in. I awoke amidst the concerned murmurs of onlookers, the hospital lights piercing through my consciousness. The experience lingered vividly in my mind, but a daunting fear took hold. What would I say? How could I convey the radical truths I had been shown? I felt unprepared to confront the backlash that would surely follow in my community. The traditions I had upheld seemingly demanded my loyalty at the expense of my newfound understanding. But deep within, I sensed a fire igniting, a conviction that my journey was far from over. The awakening that Jesus had ignited within me would compel me to challenge the status quo, to invite others into the light, even at the risk of rejection. How the world would respond remained uncertain, but I knew that I couldn't retreat into silence. The time for truth was now. The rhythm of my life as a Muezzin in Mecca had once brought me a deep sense of purpose, but lately, that purpose felt like a distant echo. As I stood before the congregation, my voice calling them to prayer, I began to feel an unsettling void opening within me. Each time I closed my eyes in deep supplication, preparing my heart for connection, I felt more like an actor than a believer. The prayers that once flowed so freely now felt hollow. The community admired my dedication, but I wrestled privately with an emotional disquiet that gnawed at my spirit. I couldn't speak of these doubts, not in a world that revered obedience and traditionalism above all else. Night after night, I found myself plagued by unsettling dreams that pierced through the layers of my consciousness. I would wake up drenched in sweat, the remnants of the dreams lingering like a dark shadow. In these dreams, figures loomed over me, whispering truths that would terrify and confound me. I was caught in a terrible struggle, my subconscious yearning for answers, something beyond the teachings I had accepted without question. Each passing day, I felt my faith morphing into something that resembled a tool of control rather than a robust path to liberation. I started to suspect that the principles I had clung to had been manipulated to serve a hidden agenda, one that left the elite in power while the faithful remained in ignorance. The more I sought solace in prayer, the deeper my questions grew. I found myself grappling with the realization that the rituals designed to strengthen my connection with God were becoming chains that tethered me to an identity I could no longer embrace. Why should I be confined to a set of beliefs that didn't foster true spiritual growth? Why did obedience often feel like surrendering my very essence? This was the internal dialogue that consumed me, yet I felt utterly alone in my turmoil. The oppressive weight of secrecy pressed down on my heart, and the cultural fabric around me discouraged any deviation from what was deemed acceptable. In this atmosphere, revealing my doubts felt like preparing for spiritual execution. Then came the fateful day when everything changed. I found myself caught in a moment of crisis, collapsing from the stress that had built up over months of confusion and fear. As I lay on the cold pavement, my consciousness faded away. A profound darkness enveloped me, and in that abyss, the boundaries of my reality dissolved. To my astonishment, I was lifted into a realm of brilliance where Jesus awaited me. His presence was overwhelming, loving, compassionate, radiating peace that shattered the darkness surrounding my spirit. In that transcendent moment, I felt untethered, as if my soul was free to explore the depths of truth. Jesus spoke directly to me, revealing layers of understanding that burned away my fears. He laid bare the hidden agendas that twisted belief systems, exposing how those in power used religion to manipulate the masses. In a world rife with division and strife, I was shown how wars are fought and lives destroyed, not for righteousness, but as pawns in a game controlled by the elite. I witnessed the facade of piety and the insidious grip of deception that held so many in bondage. The revelation of truth surged through me, igniting a fire in my heart. I realized that the spiritual war I felt within myself was merely a reflection of a greater battle, a battle for enlightenment, for freedom from the chains of outdated doctrines. As the vision enveloped me, I sensed an urgent calling to awaken. "You have the power to break free," Jesus told me, imploring me to share what I had seen. I understood in that moment that my passion for truth was not just for myself, but a mandate to guide others towards understanding. My community, wrapped tightly in tradition, needed this awakening more than anything. The emotional void I had felt began to transform, shifting into a mission to challenge the very fabric of the beliefs that constrained us. The path ahead was daunting, fraught with fear of backlash, but the prospect of liberation for myself and others was worth every sacrifice. I could feel the tempest of emotions swirling around me, intertwining with unwavering determination as I stepped back into the world, ready to confront the realities I had once accepted without question. Would I be able to navigate this new journey, or would the weight of my past drag me back into obscurity? The burden of truth rested squarely on my shoulders, and I had to decide if I was ready to carry it. After a long night of prayer, I was emotionally spent, yet strangely exhilarated. The connection I felt with the divine was palpable, a whisper of something far deeper than I had ever known. But as I left the mosque, stepping into the stillness of the night, that sense of peace shattered in an instant. In the blink of an eye, a car careened around the corner, and I didn't have time to react. I felt the impact like a thunderclap, my body crumpling under the weight of the vehicle. As darkness closed in, fear gripped me, but within those last fleeting moments, an unexpected calm washed over me. When consciousness slipped away, I found myself in an expanse of darkness, a void that felt endless and empty. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but then, out of that nothingness, a radiant light emerged, brilliant and enveloping. As I drew closer, I realized with a mixture of awe and familiarity that this was Jesus. A wave of profound love surged through me, and in that moment, I felt completely known and accepted. He called my name with a depth of compassion that pierced through my heart, illuminating the shadows I had carried for so long. Jesus extended his arms, and the weight of my life, my struggles, disappeared in the warmth of his light. In the presence of Jesus, I experienced a revelation that changed everything. He began to unveil the reality of the spiritual war that had been waged around and within me. The layers of deception that had clouded my understanding of faith were peeled back, exposing the hidden agenda of the elite who had manipulated religion for their own gain. I saw how cultural and religious structures, rather than uplifting, had obscured the truth, trapping so many in a cycle of compliance and fear. It became painfully clear that my own adherence to these traditions had dulled my spirit, keeping me locked away from the vibrant truth that could set me free. I witnessed the effects of this manipulation on a global scale. Wars fought in the name of religion displayed how easily faith could be twisted into a weapon, pitting communities against one another, while the true instigators benefited from the chaos. I saw how leaders exploited our fears, perpetuating division instead of unity. The spiritual awakening I felt in that moment was not just personal, it was a clarion call for humanity to recognize the deceptions that had ensnared us all. It was as if the veil had been lifted, revealing a world desperate for healing, love, and a return to the true essence of faith. With a sense of urgency, Jesus implored me to take this revelation and share it, to guide others trapped in the same web of lies I had been ensnared in. In his eyes, I saw a reflection of hope. Hope for those whose spirits were dimmed by years of suppression. I returned to my own life, propelled by an insatiable need to expose the truth I had witnessed. But as my consciousness slipped back into reality, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on me once more. How could I convey the enormity of what I had learned? The spiritual war within me began anew as I braced for the challenging journey ahead, determined to awaken others to the truth that Jesus had brought to light. Yet the question lingered. Would I have the strength to confront the inevitable pushback from the very traditions I had once held so dear? When I returned to the world I once knew, everything felt irrevocably altered. The vibrant colors of my life had faded into dullness, and the weight of my revelations bore down heavily on my shoulders. My encounter with Jesus in that moment of crisis had opened my eyes to the spiritual war that raged around us. But it had also created an insurmountable chasm between me and the community I had devoted my life to. My family and friends could not understand the transformation I had undergone. To them, I had become a heretic, a traitor to the very faith that had defined my existence. The aggressive rejection I faced was palpable, drenching my once cherished relationships in resentment and hostility. In the days that followed, I felt like a ghost wandering through a landscape of betrayal. Each familiar face held a look of disappointment or anger, a stark reminder that my awakening had come at a cost. My heart ached as I witnessed the sharpness in their words, the way they labeled my truth-seeking as blasphemy. Loneliness wrapped itself tightly around me, my home feeling more like a prison than a sanctuary. I yearned for the understanding that had been so vital in the past, yet now it seemed painfully out of reach. Guilt gnawed at me, as if I had committed an unforgivable sin by daring to seek a deeper spiritual connection, one that transcended the boundaries my culture had imposed. Despite the internal turmoil, a flicker of determination burned within my heart. My encounter with Jesus had ignited an insatiable quest for truth, a truth that not only liberated me but could also reach others imprisoned in the same web of deception. The longing for freedom became a fierce driving force, pushing me to explore the depths of my experience and seek out others who shared this hunger for spiritual awakening. I began reaching out to local community groups, newcomers, and those who felt disillusioned with the rigid structures of faith. Each meeting was both terrifying and exhilarating. I shared my story, my journey through doubt, and the revelations that had turned my world upside down. Yet, with every person I spoke to, I felt the swell of urgency become more potent. I realized that the manipulation of faith by the elite was a disease infecting the spirit of humanity. I saw the toll it took on women and men alike, how it instilled fear, division, and compliance instead of love and unity. The conflicts that raged around the world reflected this spiritual war, a global struggle fueled by the hidden agendas that perpetuated suffering. The truth I had encountered needed to be shared far and wide. It was a message of awakening that could spark much-needed change. As I became more vocal about my newfound understanding, the backlash only intensified. Friends abandoned me, family members turned their backs, and the words of condemnation hung in the air like dark storm clouds. Each rebuff stung, and yet I held my ground, driven by the love and peace I felt in the presence of Jesus. I knew that even with the loneliness that accompanied my quest, I was no longer alone in my spirit. I carried the message of awakening and liberation within me, and that knowledge filled the empty spaces left by rejection. I was on the precipice of something vast and powerful, a movement that could challenge the chains of deception shackling so many. But as I pushed forward into this spiritual battleground, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending conflict. What would it cost me to stand firm in my truth? How far would I be willing to go to galvanize others to recognize their own potential for awakening? These questions loomed over me like a veil, and as I faced the world outside, I knew that the spiritual war would require every ounce of courage I possessed. My journey had taken me into transformative territory, yet the road ahead was fraught with risk, and I felt the pull of both fear and hope intertwining within me. How this struggle would unfold remained uncertain, but I was determined to navigate the trials ahead, fueled by the undeniable truth that had illuminated my path. Determined to comprehend the new reality I had been thrust into, I began to explore. I found myself drawn to the Bible, its pages filled with words that resonated with the revelations I had experienced during my near-death encounter with Jesus. Each verse seemed to echo the truths I desperately sought, and I felt compelled to dive deeper. With every chapter, I discovered stories of struggle, sacrifice, and transformation, mirroring my own journey in a way I had never imagined possible. As I read, a profound sense of awakening washed over me. But amidst that excitement was an unmistakable fear. I was venturing into uncharted territory, and the very foundations of my old life trembled beneath me. I also began to watch testimonies from others who had walked a similar path, people who had turned their backs on Islam to embrace a new faith. Each story was powerful and heart-wrenching, filled with emotional turmoil, and yet underneath it all, a shared sense of liberation. I could see the struggle in their eyes, the challenges they faced, not just from the outside world, but from within themselves. As I listened intently, I felt a connection, a knowing that we were all part of the same spiritual war, battling the deception that bound us. Their journeys were both an encouragement and a warning, reminding me of the risks involved in living my truth openly. Through these videos and the scriptures, I stumbled upon a secret community of ex-Muslims who shared their journeys of faith and awakening. Each night I scoured forums, reading their posts and finding solace in their experiences. Many had faced the same loneliness, the same guilt, and the same fears of losing family and heritage. It was both comforting and terrifying. While I felt a sense of belonging in this newfound community, I was constantly haunted by the thought of my own family's rejection, their disappointment solidified by the traditions we had shared. I imagined the anguish that would cross my mother's face if she learned of my transformation. Would she ever understand, let alone accept me? One evening, amidst the chaos of my thoughts, I took a leap of faith. Sitting alone in my dimly lit room, I felt an overwhelming urge to pray, to reach out to Jesus in a way I had never done before. I knelt with a heart full of apprehension and hope, seeking strength to navigate this spiritual awakening. In that moment of vulnerability, I poured out my fears and desires, asking for guidance and peace. What unfolded next was a profound experience that left me breathless. I felt the weight of my isolation begin to lift, replaced by a warmth that enveloped me, filling the empty spaces within my heart. It was as if I was being held in a divine embrace, a reassurance that I was not alone in this journey. Yet even as I basked in that moment of spiritual rebirth, a stark realization hit me. This awakening could come at a cost. The reality of potentially losing my family, my place in our community, and the very identity I had known weighed heavily upon my heart. While I craved authenticity and truth, I simultaneously feared the painful sacrifices that might come with it. The dichotomy of my existence was becoming unbearable. As I ventured deeper into this spiritual exploration, I realized that the pursuit of truth often demands a fight against deception and complacency. What awaited me was both exhilarating and daunting, drawing me closer to the precipice of change. The questioning remained. Would the love and truth I found be strong enough to carry me through the trials that lay ahead? The moment my consciousness returned to the physical world, I was met with a sobering realization. My experience was no longer just about me. It was clear to me that the transformative encounter I had with Jesus held a greater purpose, one that propelled me into a mission to uncover and share the truth I had discovered. The hidden agenda of manipulation and deception that I had seen during my near-death experience was not a solitary battle. It was a collective struggle for awakening and liberation that spanned across communities and cultures. With each passing day, I felt the weight of this responsibility growing heavier on my shoulders, awakening a fierce determination within me. I could no longer remain silent, for the very course of humanity depended on it. I began to reflect on the teachings I had grown up with, the doctrines that had framed my reality for so long. Now, in the light of the revelation brought to me by Jesus, those same teachings felt like shackles rather than wings. As I contemplated this, I could see how entrenched societal structures cultivated an environment ripe for control, leading countless believers away from true spiritual freedom. The elite, I had learned, thrived on deception, crafting narratives that kept the masses in fear and compliance. This revelation ignited something deep within me, a yearning to break these chains not just for myself, but for everyone still held by ignorance. Determined to act, I felt compelled to share my story with others, who, like me, may be questioning their own faith. I reached out to individuals in my community and beyond, gradually finding connections with fellow seekers who shared a similar desire to uncover the truth. Each conversation was a layer peeled back, revealing the widespread struggle against the spiritual war we were all engaged in. We found comfort in the exchange of personal testimonies, drawing strength from one another as we collectively pieced together the narrative that had been concealed from us for too long. There was an urgency in our discussions, a palpable sense of awakening that swept through our gatherings, igniting hope amid skepticism. However, with the courage to speak my truth, came the undeniable fear of backlash. I knew the repercussions of challenging long-held beliefs, the societal pressure that came with swimming against the tide. My family's disappointment weighed heavily on my heart. They had raised me in a tradition that defined their very existence. To reject it felt like an act of betrayal, and yet I could not ignore the call of my spirit. I began praying fervently, seeking guidance as I wrestled with my emotions. My relationship with Jesus became my anchor, a source of strength reminding me that true loyalty to one's faith must be rooted in authenticity, not mere adherence to constructs that limit genuine connection. As I continued to delve into the transformative power of my faith, I began to formulate a plan to reach a broader audience. I envisioned community gatherings where people could explore their doubts and seek answers without a fear of judgment. I imagined leading discussions that tackled the difficult questions surrounding faith and spirituality, illuminating the truths hidden by the elite. With every step I took toward action, I felt more empowered to stand up to the deception that had clouded our understanding of God. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but I was no longer a passive observer. I had become an active participant in the spiritual war that raged both around me and within my own soul. Each decision I made pushed me closer to shedding the chains of my past, inviting others to join me on this journey toward awakening. Yet, as I prepared to take these bold steps forward, I felt a tremor of doubt ripple through me. What if my efforts were met with resistance? What if I became isolated, pushing away those I loved in my pursuit of truth? The questions loomed large, but so did the urgency of my mission. With every moment that passed, I could hear the echoes of the spiritual battlefield, calling me forward. The fight for truth was not just about personal liberation. It was about igniting a flame within each soul still yearning for freedom. And as I stood at the threshold of a new frontier, I knew I had to embrace my calling, no matter the consequences. Would I find the strength to persevere, or would the cost of my awakening prove too great? In a symbolic act of liberation, I found myself standing at the threshold of my home, knowing I had to leave everything behind. The familiar surroundings of my community in Mecca felt like a heavy cloak, suffocating me with the weight of tradition and expectations. My decision to abandon the life I once knew came after months of deep introspection and spiritual turmoil. The revelations I had encountered during my near-death experience with Jesus had ignited a fire within me, pushing me to seek truth beyond what had been dictated by society and religion. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and stepped forward into the unknown, ready to embrace my new identity. As I walked into the vast expanse of the desert, I could feel the enormity of my choice settling in. The sun beat down mercilessly, and with each step, the loneliness wrapped around me like a shroud. But with this physical isolation came a newfound sense of freedom, a liberating emptiness, where the expectations of my past could no longer reach me. As I journeyed deeper into the wilderness, I felt as if I were shedding layers of skin, leaving behind the man who had served as a Muezzin, bound by cultural and familial obligations. I adopted a new name, one that symbolized my rebirth and allowed me to start anew, a name that was solely mine, free from the weight of my previous identity. Yet the journey was not easy. With the withdrawal from the familiar came profound suffering. I faced physical hardships, hunger, and the relentless heat of the desert sun. But it was in this suffering that I discovered strength I never knew I possessed. The barren landscape became a reflection of my own internal struggles, forcing me to confront the truths about myself and the lies I had believed for so long. There were moments of desperation when I doubted my decision, but each time I felt the pain of regret creeping in. A voice within reminded me of the spiritual war that was being waged, both outside and within. I realized that this journey was always going to be challenging, but it was also necessary to uncover the truth I was so desperately seeking. In those quiet moments of solitude, I began to experience a deeper connection to God. I prayed to Jesus for guidance, feeling the weight of my previous silence lift as I poured out my heart. My prayers became a lifeline, an affirmation of my newfound belief in Him and the truth He represented. The moments of clarity and insight I gained during these prayers fueled my desire to share my story. I yearned to find others who were somehow trapped in their own spiritual prisons, longing for release. I envisioned creating a community where people could come together to explore the depths of their faith without fear, a sanctuary for those seeking the genuine purpose that I had only just begun to understand. As the days turned into weeks, I encountered others along my path who had begun to feel similar awakenings. Each encounter rekindled hope within me, showing me that liberation was a shared journey. We gathered under the stars, exchanging stories of our struggles and revelations, recognizing the deceptive forces that had kept us in chains. This was not just about leaving behind a religion. It was about understanding how the elite had stealthily distorted the essence of our beliefs for their own gain. The urgency to spread this message became palpable. We were living in a time where the hidden agenda of those in power sought to keep the truth buried. The wars fought across the globe were not simply about ideologies, but rooted in manipulation. The revelations I had glimpsed danced in my mind like a flame, driving me to act. With every decision to open my heart and share my experiences, I felt the spiritual rebirth continue. The mission had become clear: to spread awareness of the truths that had ignited my journey, to help others awaken to the reality of their own spiritual warfare. However, alongside this growing purpose was the nagging fear of losing everything I had once cherished. My family, my heritage, the community I had been part of. Could I truly walk away from it? All in search of something that felt so real. As I stood at this new precipice, balancing precariously between fear and faith, I knew the path ahead would demand every ounce of courage I could muster. The revelations I had gained would not only reshape my life, but could serve as a light for others still trapped in the darkness. As the dawn broke on a new day, I braced myself for what was to come, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead in this extraordinary journey of awakening. Years have passed since that fateful night when everything changed for me. I'm Ali, the former Muezzin of Mecca. Now, I live a mission-driven life, committed to guiding others toward faith and helping them find the truth that had once eluded me. It's a profound calling born from my encounter with Jesus during a near-death experience that unveiled the spiritual war that raged within and around us. I reflect on the journey I've taken, where awakening became both a blessing and a burden, and the memory of that moment still fuels my passion for truth today. Every day, I strive to positively impact the lives of those who feel trapped in the confines of their beliefs. I seek to be a beacon of hope for those who feel the same emptiness I once felt, a sense of disconnect from the teachings that were meant to uplift us. As I share my story, I cannot help but feel the weight of the hidden agendas that have manipulated faith for generations. I emphasize the urgent need for awakening against the backdrop of societal and political deceit that often keeps people oppressed. The elite thrive on division, and I aim to dismantle the barriers of ignorance that prevent the light of truth from shining through. However, reconciling my new identity with my family ties remains a constant struggle. I hold on to the hope that one day, my family will come to understand and accept the choice I made to follow a different path. The fear of losing them still lingers in the corners of my mind, a painful reminder of the relationships left behind. I miss the warmth of those connections, yet the truth I've encountered compels me to move forward. I've seen the broader spiritual landscape, and I can't close my eyes to the realities that lie beneath the surface. The tension I feel is palpable, especially as I engage with others who share a similar longing for truth. Each conversation is both a gift and a reminder of the stakes involved in this spiritual war. I often gather small groups, helping them navigate their own experiences, encouraging them to question the status quo and seek their own revelations. Together we explore the intersections of faith, culture, and identity, acknowledging the profound impact the hidden agendas of power hold over us. The realization that we're not alone in this fight is incredibly empowering. Yet, even as I positively influence others, I cannot ignore the gnawing fear of retaliation from those who uphold those very structures of control. I find myself in a delicate balance between the freedom I've found and the ties that hold me back. Each day is a testament to the awakening, the clashes between love and fear, acceptance and rejection. I realize that the journey is far from over, and every step forward may reveal new challenges. But with each struggle, I also feel a surge of hope, believing that ultimately, love will prevail in the battle against deception. The truths I share, born from my encounter with Jesus, fuel not just my mission, but resonate with the collective consciousness yearning for liberation. I ask myself constantly, how far am I willing to go for this truth? What deeper revelations await me as I step into the light? The path ahead is uncertain, but I remain committed to uncovering and sharing the awakening that can transform lives. As I navigated through life as a Muezzin in Mecca, I constantly felt the weight of expectations pressing down on me. My role was one of reverence, a respected position within the community that should have filled me with pride and purpose. I wore my traditional attire with honor, believing I was upholding a legacy that connected me to my ancestors and to God. But deep down, a turmoil simmered, an unsettling feeling that my devotion was shackled by the very structure I was meant to serve. Each call to prayer echoed with reverence in the streets, yet resonated with a growing emptiness inside my soul, a disconnection I couldn't articulate to anyone around me. That emptiness culminated one evening when, after an intense prayer session, I was left grappling with questions threatening to unravel the fabric of my faith. I couldn't ignore the nagging thought that perhaps the very faith I had devoted my life to had a hidden agenda, one that served the elite more than the spiritual needs of the people. As I surrendered to sleep, I was plunged into a dark void where my fears coiled around me. It was a night that would change everything. My life as I knew it came to a startling halt when I suffered an accident that rendered me unconscious, propelling me into an encounter I would never forget. In that near-death experience, I found myself enveloped by a blinding light so warm and inviting that I felt all my fears dissipate. In the heart of that light stood Jesus, who called my name softly, yet with an authority that shook me to my core. His eyes held a depth of compassion that pierced through the layers of confusion I had accumulated over the years. It was here, in the presence of the divine, that the revelation began to unfold. Jesus opened my eyes to the spiritual war raging both around me and within my own heart, revealing how the cultural and religious systems I revered had instilled fear, keeping me prisoner to a very real deception. As he spoke, I was shown glimpses of the world, the manipulation of truths by those in power, the ways the elite crafted narratives to divide and control, while we, the faithful, wandered, blissfully unaware of the true nature of our chains. I witnessed the wars simmering in various corners of the globe, ignited not by necessity, but by an insidious agenda cloaked in the guise of righteousness. The urgent call for awakening reverberated through me, and I understood that I had a role to play in shedding light on the shadows that consumed so many. The burden of the truth I was discovering weighed heavily on my heart, yet I felt simultaneously compelled and empowered to share this revelation. Returning to the physical world was jarring. I woke in a hospital bed, the surrounding chaos starkly contrasting the serenity I had experienced, but the sense of clarity burned brightly within me. I realized I could no longer remain silent. With a newfound understanding of the urgency surrounding our spiritual battle, I felt driven to share my experience. I reached out to others yearning for truth, crafting a path towards liberation. Each conversation was a step into the light, gathering those who also sensed the deception that by nature seemed to warp their faith. I became a conduit for truth, an agent of awakening, yet the fear of rejection from my family loomed large, a painful reminder that they may never understand the journey I had undertaken. As I began sharing my experiences, the reactions varied from acceptance and support to hostility and rejection. Those who once revered me now viewed me with suspicion, calling me a heretic and dismissing my truths as dangerous ideologies. But amidst the turmoil, I found moments of connection with others who felt the same longing for spiritual authenticity. We began to form a community, a sanctuary for those seeking freedom from the shackles of misleading narratives. The fear and confusion I once felt transformed into a burning passion to reveal the truth about the systems that had constrained us for so long. Yet every step forward carried with it a risk, forcing me to confront my deepest fears. Would I truly lose my family, my heritage, all that I had known in pursuit of this awakening? Each day presented a new battle, both within and around me, illuminating the depths of the spiritual war that challenged every belief I had held. The elaborate deceptions of the elite ran deep, and I was determined to expose them. As I stood at the crossroads of my past and future, the stakes had never felt higher. The truths I was beginning to uncover begged for exploration. How far was I prepared to go in this search for spiritual freedom? Would I be able to navigate the storm of rejection and rally others to the truth I was learning? The journey had only just begun, and the horizon stretched out before me, filled with both promise and uncertainty. Now that you've journeyed with me through the depths of my transformation, I must ask, what if the very beliefs we hold sacred are but mirrors reflecting the manipulations woven by unseen hands? In the heart of our stories lies an undeniable truth. We are, all of us, caught in a spiritual war, a battle not just for souls, but for the very essence of our freedom. I stand before you now, a testament to awakening, yet painfully aware of the cost. My name is Ali, and my encounter with Jesus revealed a reality that demands more than silence and conformity. Each of your lives intertwines with this narrative. We are not isolated in our struggles. We are part of a larger tapestry being pulled by unseen forces determined to keep us in shadows of fear and division. But the light, the truth, is calling us out. Will you heed that call? I invite you to reflect. Have you ever felt a similar tug at your heart, a stirring within that urges you to question the narratives you've accepted? I want to hear your thoughts, your stories, and your awakenings. Please, share your experiences in the comments below. Your voice matters and could ignite a spark in someone else seeking liberation from their own chains. If this message resonates with you, don't turn away. Subscribe to Truth from Beyond and hit the notification bell. It's vital that we connect in this community where truth finds its home. What's next is not merely another video. It's a continuation of this journey we've embarked on together. In our upcoming episode, we'll explore another powerful testimony of spiritual awakening that could illuminate your path even further. Thank you for walking this path with me. I'm Ali. And remember, your journey toward truth is not just your own. It's a collective awakening. Together, let's illuminate the shadows and embrace the freedom that awaits us on the other side.